Hello everybody, it is an honor to be here in Melbourne. This is at least my third trip here, and I would like to reassert something I say to my American audience on the radio. I think you live in one of the most wonderful cities in the world. I have been to 130 countries. I have some background in making a comparison. I have still not met a mean member of the Melbourne citizenry. I'm sure such people exist, but I have not had the honor of meeting them as of yet. Every single person that my wife and I have met has been just utterly friendly and wonderful. You are very fortunate to be here, and they are very fortunate to have you. So thank you for having me. By the way, I just want to tell you of a fear that I always have. I've had this now for about 30 years. When I wrote my second book, it was co-authored with Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, who's a very well-known American Jewish writer. I'm sure many of you are familiar with his works. And the second book that I wrote was titled, Why the Jews? The Reason for Anti-Semitism. So I have known Joseph since high school. We met at the Yeshiva of Flatbush in Brooklyn, New York. And I knew him at least as well as his parents. I certainly didn't need any notes. This is what I said in introducing him as the co-author of the book on anti-Semitism. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce to you my friend and co-author, Joseph Telushkin. When Joseph Telushkin speaks, he brings Jewish history to life. He brings Jewish thought to life. He brings anti-Semitism to life. Now, you realize how he must have felt as being introduced as one who, as a result of speaking, causes pogroms. But that was a terrible introduction, and I thank Haley for the beautiful one that she gave to me. I want to do something with you that is important to me. Since I was a child, I always wanted to know why. Most children ask why, but as they get older, they give up. I never gave up. I wanted to understand why. And the question that I would like to answer tonight, ask and answer, is why is Israel so isolated among the nations of the world? Let's begin with the fact that it is virtually alone in the world. I'm not happy to tell you this. You all know it. It's not something we feel in this room, but it is a fact of life. The isolation of the Jewish state. First of all, it is the only country in the world targeted for extinction. There is no other country in the world that is targeted for annihilation. Think about it. Every country hates its neighbor. That is the way it works. The French hate the Germans hate the Russians hate the Poles hate the Ukrainians, the Japanese hate the Chinese hate the Koreans. It's endless. But no one in history has aimed to annihilate the other. Jew hatred and Israel hatred is in fact a form of Jew hatred, are unique. There is no form of bigotry, of bias, of prejudice that is comparable to Jew hatred. I'm not happy to tell you this, but I want to present the data and then ask why, because it is life-changing to try to understand, or to understand it the only way I believe reason dictates that we understand it. Incidentally, having said what I just said, let me just answer a charge that is frequently made, and one that I have to answer frequently in America on the radio. Are you saying, Dennis, that anti-Zionism is the same as anti-Semitism? To which the answer is, of course I am. If somebody said, I love Italians, but I think Italy has no right to exist, you would not consider them Italian lovers. The idea is an absurdity. I love pizza, I love Verdi, I love Puccini, I love Vivaldi, I love the great Italian artists and architects, but I think Italy should be destroyed doesn't win you over Italian fans. They understand you are an enemy of the Italian people. Anti-Zionism means that of all the countries in the world, only one do you deem unworthy of existence, and it happens to be Israel, and Israel happens to be the only Jewish country. So I want you to have intellectual ammunition to answer the fraudulent statement of I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not anti-Jewish, I'm anti-Zionist. That is a moral fraud, and you must understand it as such. To isolate of all the countries in the world, only the Jewish one, I get these calls on the radio, and these are not bad people. Some are bad, but not all are. Some actually say, well, Dennis, it's just not right. They took over Palestinian land, or whatever the argument will be made. So I always ask these people, did you ever call a talk show host and complain about Pakistan's existence? Of course, the answer is no. It's a rhetorical question. But they don't even know why I'm asking the question. But most people in the world don't know this. Whereas there were 2 Jewish sovereign states in the land known as Palestine, a name given by the Romans to eradicate the Jewish origins of the country. Whereas there were 2 only Jewish states, there were never any non-Jewish, not Muslim, not Christian, no other sovereign states, only Jewish ones in that land. In Pakistan never existed. It was made up, and the same time Israel was, 1947-48. There were millions of refugees, not 500,000 or 700,000, millions. There were tens of thousands of rapes. There was at least 1 million killed on both sides between Hindu and Muslim. Pakistan was one of the most violently founded states in the history of the world. No one claims Pakistan is illegitimate, even though there are 52 Muslim-majority states in the world. Nevertheless, no one claims, well, why does Pakistan have a right to exist? That is why you must understand all challenges to Israel's legitimacy are Jew hatred on a state level. That is all they are. If that's the one country on earth you don't think has a right to exist, and it is the only country on earth that is a Jewish country, we have a right to put 2 and 2 together. That's number 1, the exterminationist uniqueness of the hatred of Israel, just like there was exterminationist uniqueness, the hatred of the Jew as an individual. This is true for Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, Erdogan's Turkey, and much of the Muslim world, and indeed much of some of the world in the West, the radical left. This is what is happening in the world today. Then we go to the universities. The most hated country in the universities of the Western world is Israel. I debated at the Oxford Forum a few years ago, most prestigious debating forum in the Western world, perhaps in the world. You can watch the debate, it's on YouTube, unless they decide to censor it, but that's a separate issue. In any event, you know what the topic was? The topic was, is Israel or Hamas the greater obstacle to Middle Eastern peace? So I want to tell you a story. This is not something that many people would know. I called up Oxford when I heard the subject of the debate. I swear to you, I thought that if the topic really were the topic, and I think I got it wrong. I was sure I had heard it wrong, because it's such an imbecilic topic. You have to be kidding that this would be even a topic for debate. But I thought if it really were the topic, some pro-Israel person at Oxford sneaked it in. That's what I was convinced. So I called Oxford and I said, I want to make sure that I have the topic right for this debate in November. And they said, well, here's the topic. And sure enough, it was the topic. And sure enough, there were about 400 Oxford students, and they voted about 250 to 150 that Israel was the greater obstacle to peace in the Middle East. And as I said to them in my comments during the debate, I said, this would be analogous to having a debate in the late 1930s, who was a greater threat to European peace, Hitler or Churchill, Nazi Germany or Great Britain. This is identical. If you vote, I told the students, if you vote that Israel is the greater threat to Middle Eastern peace, you will be stating that for the first time in recorded history, in a battle between a free state and a police state, it is the free state that is the bellicose state. This would be the first time in history that the reason for lack of peace was not the police state, it was the free state. There is no example in history of a free state, police state battle in which the free state is the one responsible for war. This would be the one exception. And they still voted 250 to 150 that Israel was the greater reason for no peace in the Middle East. Incidentally, you debate at Oxford 2 versus 2. One of the two that my partner Shmuley Boteach and I debated, one of the two was, and take a deep breath, an Israeli. His name is Avi Shlein. He's a professor of international affairs at Oxford. He's Israeli. He served in Tzahal in the IDF, and he made sure to let everybody know that he had. And I was thinking when he was arguing that Hamas was the peace lover and Israel was the agitator and the aggressor, I was thinking, is there any other people in the world that produces so many who are truly, I'm trying to choose a word that isn't too harsh. It's very hard. And I'm not being cute. I don't know what word, I'm thinking the word twisted, to be perfectly open with you. But whatever term you wish to use, does anybody produce people like we do, who do everything they can to hurt their own people? I don't think so. I think we Jews are unique in that way. For an Israeli to argue that Israel is the greater threat than Hamas, Hamas is for all intents and purposes a Muslim version of the Nazi party. Its raison d'etre, it has one raison d'etre, one reason for being, to annihilate the Jewish state. It doesn't care about building hospitals, it doesn't care about building schools, it cares about building tunnels to send its people to murder as many Jews as possible. That is it. There is no other function. I will talk about this pervasive no other function, no other reason for existence in parts of the Arab and Muslim worlds in a moment. But the second place that isolates Israel for opprobrium is the university. The university is the center of Israel hatred in the Western world. I tell American Jews that it's something they should be aware of, because there is an American Jewish life. There may well be here as well. I don't know. I simply don't know. But in America, when you ask a Jew, how are you? There's a good chance that the answer will be, my daughter is at Yale. That is how an American Jew is. Not fine, not well. It means nothing. Their health is tertiary. First and second is what college their daughter or son goes to. I actually believe that the worship of the university is a form of avodah zarah, a form of idol worship in Jewish life. But I'll tell you one thing that I do warn Jews about, and that is this. I hope you're in cognitive dissonance, I tell my fellow American Jew. That which you most revere is our biggest enemy, turns out to be our biggest enemy, and that which you most fear turns out to be our best friend. You most revere the university, turns out to be our biggest enemy. You most fear Christians, who turn out to be our best friends. If that doesn't drive a Jew to drinking, nothing will. That is the very definition of cognitive dissonance. I will talk more about the Christian aspect as well in a moment. But please understand the university. You know how bad it is? I debated at UCLA, that's the University of California, Los Angeles. I debated the head of the Department of Jewish Studies. You know what the subject of that debate was? Is there a moral difference between Israeli and Palestinian society? He said no, and I said yes. Did you hear what I said? This is the chairman of the Department of Jewish Studies, not the Department of Islamic Studies. The Department of Jewish Studies debated me at UCLA on that issue, claiming there is no moral distinction between Israel and the Palestinians. A society that takes in people wounded in the Syrian civil war, gives them free treatment and surgery, sends them back, and they can never tell that it was a Jew who saved their lives or they will be dead, versus a society that pays money to people whose family members have slaughtered Jews in Israel. Okay. The head of the department, that Department of Jewish Studies at UCLA, incidentally, invited one of the most pro-BDS spokesmen in the country to give a speech on Abraham Joshua Heschel. You don't know how bad the university is. You probably don't. I do, because I spend a great deal of time on my national radio show in the US talking about it. But it has infected Jewish life in America just as badly as it has infected anyone else. It got so bad that the Hillel at Princeton disinvited the Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel, at which point Michael Oren, the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, said, no Israeli should go and speak for Princeton's Hillel again. Now, for the record, Hillel apologized, and I give them credit. But what would even lead them to begin with? A Hillel, supposedly representing Jewish students, says that the Deputy Foreign Minister of Israel is not welcome to speak at the Hillel of Princeton University. So we have here the world, we have the universities, and we have, of course, the United Nations. The United Nations has spent more time condemning Israel than any other country in the world. More time on Israel than anything else. If an extraterrestrial came and visited Earth, they would go to the UN to find out what Earth was about. And they would find out a very interesting thing, that the biggest issue on planet Earth was a place called Israel. So they would go back to their interstellar place, and then they would give a report, and they would say, well, the biggest issue for these Earthlings is a place called Israel. Apparently it's what they call a Jewish country. And then they would ask the spy, oh really, how big is Israel? Then they would look it up, and they would find that it was smaller than El Salvador. And that would be a bit disturbing, and he would never be sent again on an interstellar spy mission. They would think he was out of his mind. It makes no sense. In the entire world of 7 billion people, a country that has in it about, 6, 7 million people, whatever the number is now, that's the greatest issue on Earth? It is. That's my point. But it's not my point. I'm getting to my point. My point is to get you to wonder, as I do, how do you explain all of these phenomena? And then there are the media. I can't speak for ABC, your ABC. I can speak about the CBC and the BBC and America's ABC. And I can only tell you that the same reporting on Israel is almost the same as at the United Nations. The United States has an ambassador right now to the United Nations who is one of the brave souls of the world, Nikki Haley. She is universally held in contempt by the American media, just so you know, and never more so than when she is defending Israel. So I add all of this up, and I was going to cite this line. The Israeli ambassador quite properly cited it already, so I will cite it again, as I always do in a talk about Israel. The Passover Seder line, Shebechol dor vador umdim aleinu lechalotenu. In every generation, somebody arises to exterminate us. And I tell the story this way. In my parents' home for the Sidarim, for the Seders, this was, of course, said. It was an Orthodox home, and the whole Haggadah was said, to my great consternation, but that's a separate subject. In any event, everything was said, but that line I remember thinking, I think I was 10 when I first started thinking this, maybe the rabbis were right then who wrote this, but they're not right today. After the Holocaust, there will not be another group to rise up to annihilate us. And the rabbis turned out right, and I turned out wrong. Indeed, that is the example, again, that the ambassador correctly gave of Iran having missiles destroy Israel. This is what they live for. Why, again, I'm leading up to a point here. Why for thousands of years has it been correct to say lechalotenu, which literally means to put an end to us, not to oppress us, not to persecute us, not to enslave us, to end us. So here is my challenge to Jews and to non-Jews. I speak to non-Jews more than to Jews in America. And I say the exact same thing. How do you explain the desire to exterminate the Jewish people? How do you explain the centrality of the Jew in the world given the tiny numbers of Jews? The centrality of Israel given how small Israel is? And here is my challenge. And I say this as a Jew who is not wearing a yarmulke or a kippah. It is only possible to explain with relationship to God. If there is no secular explanation for the uniqueness of the Jews in history. And this is a challenge to all Jews who are not religious. I am not here to push orthodoxy. I am not an Orthodox Jew. I am here to push reason. Reason alone has led me to the conclusion that there is no non-religious explanation for Jewish history. You cannot give me, there is no, I know all the books on the roots of anti-Semitism. None make sense. The economic roots are preposterous. The economic roots. When Jews are rich, they're hated. When Jews are poor, they're hated. The Nazis couldn't care less if you were rich or poor. Iran couldn't care less about the wealth or the poverty of the Jews it wants to annihilate in Israel. There is no economic explanation for anti-Semitism. When Jews live dispersed, they're called rootless cosmopolitans, Stalin's term. When Jews live in one country, they're called tribalist. There is no non-religious interpretation. If I didn't believe that, by the way, I would not be standing in front of you as a committed Jew. I am totally open about this. If I didn't think that there was ultimately God involved in Jewish history, I would not have raised children to be Jews. It's too risky. But there is no other explanation. There is a book you should read, or if you want to watch the 5-minute video, and I suspect most will prefer to do that, unfortunately. George Gilder is a non-Jewish philosopher in America, major economist philosopher. He made a 5-minute video for my website called Prager University, which had 600 million views last year, and I only tell you that not to boast, but so you'll know this is the real deal. And he made a video on his book, The Israel Test. This non-Jewish economist philosopher, his theory is very simple. Watch how people react to Israel, and that's pretty much all you need to know about their values. And I agree with him. By the way, if he's right, what does it say about our universities? What does it say about the United Nations? What does it say about much of the Muslim world? What does it say about much of the media? If he's right, and I know he's right, how people react to Israel is as clear a moral litmus test as exists in the world today. And much of the world fails, including its most distinguished aspects, the university, the media, the UN, and etc. This is the reality in which we live. The Jews are the miner's canary. Miners take canaries down to mines because when there are noxious fumes, the canary dies immediately, before the miner even knows there are noxious fumes. And the miner knows the canary died, we better fight noxious fumes or we die. And I tell non-Jews all the time, and they're my primary audience, if you don't understand that, you will die, because the noxious fumes only begin with the canary, they never end with the canary. The Jew haters begin with Israel, begin with the Jew, but they never stop with the Jew. Hitler didn't stop with Jews. The non-Jewish fools who didn't understand how evil Hitler was because they dismissed him as a Jewish problem ended up with 50 million non-Jews dead in World War II. We have a very miserable role in the world. It is. Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof said, God, why don't you choose somebody else for a change? There is no Jew who does not relate to that lament. How about, not because I'm anti-Burmese, but maybe choose the Burmese for a generation, the Paraguayans for another generation. Let us live a boring life. Jews pray for boredom. But we're not allowed it because we're the chosen people. We're here to confront the world with right and wrong. That doesn't mean Jews are better. There are plenty of disgusting Jews and there are plenty of beautiful goyim. Everybody in this room knows that. The issue isn't any superiority of the Jews. It is simply a fact that the Jews represent something transcendent in the world that the world would like to extinguish. That's what this is all about. And Jews need to know it, and they don't. Religious Jews don't speak about this much, and non-religious Jews don't speak about this at all. But as I said, there is no secular explanation for the loneliness of the state of Israel. Israelis don't know it, and non-Israelis don't know it. But that is the case. This is what is happening in the world today. This, by the way, I have to tell you, it actually, in an odd way, it strengthens my own emunah, my own faith. If the world yawned at Israel, if the world yawned at Jews, I wouldn't have such a sense of, well, maybe this is all made up, this chosenness stuff. But the preoccupation with the Jew and now the preoccupation with Israel and the division of the world based on how it reacts to Israel. You know why Christians support Israel? Some Jews dismiss their support in very cynical ways. Oh, they just want to convert us, as if there's one Jew who's ever converted because Christians support Israel. Oh, they do it because they want to bring Jesus back for a second coming. The head of the biggest Christian organization supporting the Jews, KUFI, Christians United for Israel, Pastor John Hagee, has said over and over and over and over, there is nothing a Christian can do to bring Jesus back. The second coming will come in God's own time. The support for Israel is for one overwhelming reason. I've heard it over and over. I speak in churches at least as much as in synagogues. And this is the reason. They quote the Torah. And the Torah says in Bereshit, in Genesis, God says to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And Christians, oddly enough, believe the Torah is the word of God. If Jews believed in the Torah as much as Christians did, the Mashiach would come. So they actually believe that when God says, I will bless those who bless you, he means it. And guess what? That's exactly what has happened, even if you're an atheist. Those who bless the Jews end up blessed. Those who curse the Jews end up cursed. Spain was thriving until it cursed its Jews. And then it went on a 500-year decline from one of the greatest powers on earth, one of the greatest sources of great literature, art, and military power, to just Spain. That's what happened. That is exactly what happened. The Germans suffered plenty for their cursing the Jews. You may not think they suffered enough. That's between you and God. But they sure suffered. They lost a lot of people. They had a lot of rape. They lost half their country under communism for 50 years. And by the way, Germany is disappearing. The German birth rate at this rate, there may be more Jews in 100 years than Germans. I'm not rooting for it. I'm merely telling you that the hand of God works. And those who bless Jews, Australia has blessed Jews. Would you say Australia has been blessed? I would. I certainly say that about the United States of America. In fact, I tell audiences all the time, the day America abandons Israel is the day you can begin the countdown for America's decline. I believe that with every fiber in my body. It is a given in human history. And guess what? Who curses the Jews today the most? The Arab countries and some other Muslim countries. And guess what the most benighted part of the world is? By golly, it's the Arab countries and many Muslim countries. So here's the deal. The day the Arabs decide to bless the Jews is the day the Arab world will change from preoccupation with death to preoccupation with life. The single greatest obstacle to Arab growth is preoccupation with destroying Israel. Period. End of issue. You can't live rooting for death. That is not a life. That is not a prescription for any advancement at all. So let me end by telling you two things. I asked UIA, can I make a pitch? They didn't refuse. I just want to say, I didn't have to twist any arms. But they did not ask me to make a pitch. But I do anyway. That's, after all, why we are here. I want to make an argument for your giving a donation, a bigger one than you thought of, that you may not have thought of. It's not just that Israel needs our funds, whether it's America or Australia or anywhere else. That's true, it does, when you think about how much it has to spend on defense. But there's another factor in Jews' support of Israel. It is read by Jews' enemies. If they see a diminution in Jews' support for Israel, they are emboldened. And if they see an increase in diaspora Jews' support for Israel, they are not emboldened. It sends a message. In other words, a contribution to Israel is a vote of support. It is not merely a dollar or whatever the currency of any given country might be. That's huge. If it said, well, with all the turmoil, Australian Jewry gave even more this year than ever before, that's a big deal. Or LA Jewry, or New York Jewry, or American Jewry, it's a big deal. Because I'm worried about the next generation of Jews in America, and you may be 1 or 2 generations behind, but you also have universities, and you also have media, which tell lies about the Jewish state. So you can't get too cocky. It's a big problem everywhere. And finally, I have ended every appeal I've ever made for Israel with this story, because it's a true story, and it's so powerful, at least I felt it's powerful. In my 20s, because of my field of study was communist affairs, I was at the Russian Institute at Columbia University, where I studied Russian and communism. So I spent a lot of time in communist countries in my 20s. One of them was Bulgaria. And I got along with people because Bulgarians all spoke Russian, so I got along fine with them. And one year I was invited by a Bulgarian family to stay with them. They had met me in East Berlin the year before. They said, if you ever come to Sofia, stay with us. You should never say that to me. I end up staying with you. So sure enough, I said, hey, I'm back. Remember the tall kid from America? Oh, yeah, we remember. Come on over. So I came over, and I spent most of a week in their home. And one of the nights, they invited all of their friends, or not all, but a lot of their friends and relatives from rural Bulgaria. It was clear it just became clear they had never, I don't know if they ever met an American, they certainly had never met a Jew. And at one point, I dropped the J-bomb. And I said, in passing, I'm a Jew. And remember, Bulgaria saved its Jews. I was not afraid of any anti-Semitism. Bulgarians are unknown for that, but they should be better known for it. I had no fear of any anti-Semitism, but they never met one. So there was silence. And then one of them said, Jews, are they the people who all help each other? And this is 40 years later, and I have the chills recounting the story to you, that all this rural Bulgarian could associate Jews with is that we help each other. And what did I think tonight before I came up? Look at this. Jews in Melbourne inviting a Jew from California to help Jews in Israel. We are the people who all help each other. Let's continue, and thank you for having me. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow, hey? Dennis, thank you so much for being here tonight, together with Sue. Your enthusiasm, knowledge and articulation of the issues which are so important to our community are genuinely inspiring. Please accept this gift as a token of our appreciation. Where'd he go? Where'd he go? Ah, there you are.
Thank you, thank you.
Let's stay for a photo. Before I ask the table captains to hand out the pledge forms, I wish to again thank each and every one of you for doing such a wonderful job. Without all our volunteers, our campaign would not be the success it is today. Can I now please ask the table captains to distribute the pledges to the guests on their table? Please take a moment to think about what Dennis has expressed and from the videos shown tonight. Please take some time to fill in your pledge forms. A UIA staff member will be around shortly to collect it, and dessert will follow shortly. Thank you.